Although most of us like to think that we are logical, thinking creatures who make up our minds based on our intelligence, the truth is that we shift back and forth between emotional and logical state all the time. So in this video, I'm going to explain the differences between those two states and how our thinking and our actions tend to change from one state to the other. And then I'll talk about what we can do to try to influence others to go into the state that we want the conversation to happen in. When we are in an emotional state, we tend to make up our minds based on the emotions we experience in that moment, combined with our deep seated wants and desires. In emotional states, we tend to think more about the here and now rather than on the future. Conversations in emotional states are great when we want to connect with someone on an intimate level or on something that they have an overall positive thinking about. It's also helpful to be in an emotional state when we want someone to make decisions based on what they want deep down rather than on superficial or logical thinking, which is often influenced by our fears, other people's opinions, what we think we should do, and so on. But decisions made in an emotional state are obviously also more likely to be of the emotional kind. And when the emotions are in the categories of nervousness, frustration, anger, or defensiveness, which is often the case in conflicts, this state is not very likely to be helpful. In fact, it's much more likely to make people act immature, lash out, or simply refuse to participate in constructive conversations. If the conflict is happening in a loving relationship, where both parts truly wish to resolve the conflict in a positive and constructive way, and the emotions you're both feeling about the conflict is that of sadness or hope, it's perfectly fine to do conflict resolution in an emotional state. When we're in a logical state, our decision making will be more influenced by logic, external factors, and long term goals. Because of this, people tend to sometimes make decisions that go against what they truly want when they're in logical states, because they're adapting to the pressures of others and less in touch with what they want deep down. But on the plus side, we also tend to think about long-term consequences when we make decisions in logical mode. And we tend to act more calmly and be more receptive to intellectual arguments. This makes the logical state the best state to be in for conflict resolution in most cases. It will reduce the likelihood that we get too upset during the conversation and increase the likelihood that we focus on the future and what we can achieve by solving the conflict. Doing conflict resolution in a logical state is recommended when the conflict happens in relationships that are more superficial or professional than intimate, or in any conflict where the emotions connected to the conflict are in the categories of frustration, anger, defensiveness, or fear. If you want to encourage someone to go into an emotional state, you want to speak and act with them in a more intimate and emotional way. This includes things such as speaking with a softer voice, slowing down, holding soft eye contact, smiling, appropriate physical contact, and speaking about things that are more emotional in nature. Having the conversation in a more intimate setting, like sitting together on the couch with dim lighting, can also help. On the other hand, if you want to encourage someone to go into a logical state, you want to speak more assertively, with a clear voice and determined pace. You should usually focus the conversation on logical topics rather than emotional ones, and it will help if the setting feels a little more professional than personal. To encourage people further, you might also want to ask them questions that encourages them to use logical arguments before you start the conflict resolution process. An example of this could be to ask a colleague to walk you through a task that they're good at, or to ask a friend explain a concept to you that you know they know a lot about before the two of you start the resolution process. So to sum up, when a conflict happens in a loving relationship where both parts are motivated to solve it and experiencing more soft than aggressive emotions, the emotional state will likely help us. But when a conflict happens in a more superficial or professional relationship, or one or more people involved are feeling anger, fear, or defensiveness. A logical state is more likely to be productive. A simple exercise to do for this chapter is to practice eliciting emotional and logical states from the people that you talk to in your everyday life. When you notice that you can get people to go from speaking professionally, like I'm doing now, to speaking in a more soft, connected, and warm way, or the other way around, you'll know that you're starting to master the art of bringing people from a logical state to an emotional state, or the other way around. But remember, no one can completely control someone else's state. Even the best people in the world won't succeed in shifting someone's state 100% of the time. So don't expect that this will work every time you try it.